Hello and welcome to This is a Dream, where it is my dream to talk with dream researchers, when-I-are-nots, lucid dreamers, and all sorts of experts in the field of dream work. My dream is to share the joy, healing, and enthusiasm I experience from dreaming. You can help me in my mission to share the magic of dreaming with the world by commenting, reviewing, and sharing this show with your friends. I always love to hear from listeners, and I enjoy connecting and responding to any questions you may have. Today on the show, we're joined with Jeanne Van Bronkhorst, an insightful author, speaker, and trainer whose lifelong fascination with dreams has intersected deeply with over 2 decades of experience in clinical psychology, social work, and hospice care. Jeanne is the author of Dreams at the Threshold, Guidance, Comfort, and Healing at the End of Life, and Premonitions in Daily Life. In her work, she shows how dreams can open tender pathways for those nearing life's end, and for their loved ones, to access reconciliation, comfort, and meaning through a simple, compassionate listening approach. Jeanne continues to volunteer with hospices, training caregivers in grief, bereavement, and dream appreciation techniques, while also writing, speaking, and presenting at conferences, particularly with the International Association for the Study of Dreams. Jeanne, I'm thrilled to have you here today. Could you start with sharing what inspired you to integrate dream work with your work in hospice and end-of-life care?
Sure, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me to come on your show. And I have always been a strong dreamer. I've always remembered my dreams. I say always, from childhood. I've remembered my dreams and thought about them, and they have at times confused me and led me to deeper questions. And so it just seemed natural that as I grew up and started working that I would look for ways to bring dreams into the work. And I have to tell you, it kind of snuck up on me in some ways because I was working as a medical social worker in a teaching hospital. And it was very fast-paced, and I was meeting with a lot of different people and looking for ways to get them safely discharged. And I was kind of walking down the hall thinking about all this, and I stepped into a patient's room, and she was in the middle of a conversation with someone I couldn't see. She was looking up towards the ceiling, and she was smiling and nodding, and she gave a little chuckle, and I knew she was seeing somebody. She was talking to somebody. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a genuine thing, and I didn't know quite what to do. I kind of cleared my throat like you see in the movies, and she brought her attention back to me, and it was like her whole face went from this kind of open, joyous kind of look. She kind of looked at me and just everything kind of shuttered down into a blank politeness because I was a stranger, and I wanted to ask her so badly. I said, I said, I'm sorry for interrupting. Were you speaking with someone? And she said no. And so we did our business and we talked about all the stuff we needed to talk about, and it wasn't that long. And as I walked out of the room, I looked back, and she had turned her attention back to the ceiling again and was talking with somebody again. And I thought, angel, ancestor, guide, parent, who was she talking to? I don't know, but it felt like I was kind of stumbling into somebody else's extraordinary experience that they were having at a time that was important for them in their lives. And frankly, I don't remember now. I know she left the hospital. I don't know, I don't know anything more about her. I don't know if she was dying or not. I just remember that moment and thinking about that and wondering kind of how are people, how do human beings go through this? So in medicine, we can get really caught up in the medical part of medicine, right? The body has a problem, we're going to fix it, and there's like this mechanistic, materialistic, how do we fix the body? Which is good, works really well. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but we kind of forget the people who are attached to the bodies and what their spirits are doing and how their emotions are doing. And it was one of the primary reasons I switched over to hospice care, because that did give me time for more conversations and to find out how people were doing. And so I thought about adding this right away, but I had to learn hospice care first, and I had to get kind of overwhelmed by what it all entails and then kind of dig my way back to kind of who I wanted to be. And I just decided every now and then, I wasn't all the time, every now and then I would say, how are you? And they'd say, fine. And I'd say, well, how are your dreams? How are your dreams doing? And it just opened these amazing conversations about everything. And it wasn't so much that we talked about the dreams themselves, but it gave them a way to know that I was interested in who they were as a people. And that was really important. And it led to, I mean, people had, and I made a little list of things that some people said, like, I dreamed I was painting again. And then this woman went on and said, I gave up painting when I got married and I had kids. I had 4 kids. They're the light of my life. I wouldn't have missed them for anything. And so it just opened up this conversation that kind of turned into a life review of painting and kids and life choices and how she approaches big decisions and what big decisions she's facing now. And it was a conversation about soul rather than about physical pain. And that really was the starting of it.
Well, so you mentioned that dreams are bringing up things from their life and they're helpful for you getting to know them as a person. I wonder, do people at the end, preparing to cross over, do they tend to typically have more dreams of a past nature, or are some also geared toward, I imagine some are also anticipatory dreams of what's to come for them. Do their dreams bring up like their feelings about what's coming?
Some of them did, but it's what got me started on writing the book Dreams at the Threshold, because then I went and I researched it. I looked at who else was talking about this and found a number of clinicians, psychologists, social workers, chaplains, grief counselors, who were all finding ways to ask people about their dreams and starting to realize that there was a progression that was going on. One man found he started interviewing people right when they first got diagnosed in a cancer center. Is that right? And he followed them every week or every 2 weeks. He'd go talk to them about their dreams until they died. And he found that those dreams actually progressed from the first panicked anxiety nightmares about dying, about falling apart, about not doctors walking away, about not having enough help, about just the fear, the existential fear of not being, and watched over time as those dreams gradually changed to become more comforting and more, they had more visitors, they had more people in their lives that they found comfort with that would come and see them and would talk to them. And so another researcher said that she found that dreams at the end of life kind of followed 2 main messages. The first one being that scary one, the body is dying, the body is breaking down. There's not much you can do about that. Your body is dying. But the second message, which became equally important and more vital as time went on, is, and you as the dreamer will continue. You as the dreamer have a future. And it would start showing people kind of movement. So people would dream about preparation for going somewhere, packing for going somewhere, closing up shop for going somewhere. They would get on trains, they'd get on ocean liners, they'd start having these dreams of actually kind of moving. So it had this bodily sense of moving into something that was going to be safe and welcoming. And as they got closer to the end of life, those dreams became safer and more welcoming and a bigger sense, so that by the time they died, the people who were having these dreams actually were having significantly easier deaths, easier dying. And that just became amazing to see. So I don't know if you want to hear about research or not, but I get caught up with this. There was a wonderful research article done in 2012 by Lawrence and Rapide, and they looked at hospital charts and they talked to nurses, talking about the people who had mentioned that they had had some kind of a visitation in their final days. And what they found is the people who reported those visitations had much less moaning and grimacing. They had very little terminal restlessness, that sense of kind of picking and trying to move. They required less medication, less anxiety medication, less pain medication. And the number of them who had peaceful and calm deaths, it went from the people who don't have those experiences, there's like a 40% of them have peaceful deaths. The people who did have that experience, 90% of them, 89% of them had peaceful deaths, is astounding. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine for the families watching their loved ones and not being able to help them, not being able to make this different or make this better. Having them see someone die peacefully just helped them immensely in their own grief. So they followed those families and saw that grief was just lessened. There was a sense that helplessness, that sense of wishing they could have done something different was really lessened. And that helped people kind of move through grief as a sense of missing them, but not of a sense of guilt or wishing they had done something different.
When you say visitation dreams at the end of life, are you referring to like visitation from spirits or people who have already crossed over, or visitation from people who are still alive, or both? Or
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And mostly I'm talking about people who have already died who are visiting, or people, sometimes there are religious figures, but mostly, especially in Western culture, it's mostly parents, grandparents, children if children have died. And I've read, and you probably know about this, a hospice and palliative care in Buffalo, New York, but they actually have a research team and they did a longitudinal study. So they followed people every day in the hospice center and asked them every day about their dreams. And what they found is that in some ways, people have all kinds of different dreams. But when they are approaching death, dreams about people who are still alive were there, but not very many, not very many. But the dreams of people who were deceased, who were also bringing comfort, just skyrocketed between in the last weeks of their lives, so that we can actually see this happening over time. Yeah, and that actually has been, that in the last 10 years has been duplicated, but not in the same way. Most researchers have been asking family members to tell them, did your loved ones have this experience? Did they have a dream? Or they'd ask the nurses who were seeing them, did they have this kind of a dream? And so the numbers were less, but when they actually had people every day going to the people who were dying and saying, tell me about your dreams and make it important, people remembered more dreams. People who hadn't really dreamed before, but every day they're being asked, and that sense of dreaming goes up. The dreams they had, the more likely they were to have a comforting dream or a visitation dream.
nice. It's nice to hear that the trend is that people tend to have more comforting dreams towards the end of life, and that they're
Yeah,
visited by, others who are waiting for them.
yeah. It is really comforting. It's comforting for me too, thinking about it for my own life.
Yeah, like I can almost feel and imagine all the ones, my ancestors and people who know me and love me.
Yeah.
Another book you wrote about premonition dreams. How can you tell? For this is a question I have, because I have a lot of dreams of car accidents, and I cross my fingers and hope that they're not premonition dreams and that they just have to do with something else. And but there's so many of them, and I wonder, like, maybe it was a past life, or that I had died in a car accident, or maybe they're premonition dreams. But I wonder, is there a way to tell whether they're related, like premonitory, or just regular other dreams?
Well, I think you're finding ways through that. Did any of them turn out to be premonition dreams? You didn't have the accidents.
No, I didn't have any. I
Okay.
actually tend to avoid driving and being in vehicles as much as possible.
Maybe because of this. Is it because of this, or are the dreams because of the avoidance?
It's kind of like the chicken and the egg question. I'm not entirely sure. I did, yeah. I did have a little fender bender accident when I first started driving when I was 18. And then since then, I've been living and working where I live at retreat centers and haven't needed to drive because I have my food and, I live where I work. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of conflicted. I'm split because I want to have the independence and freedom that comes with driving, but also nervous. I wonder, like, yeah, are they premonitory dreams, and am I going to die in a car accident?
Yeah,
But I don't
I
know.
hear
It
that.
seems like, I don't know. Seems like silly to worry about that but driving is dangerous, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it's silly. I don't think it's silly at all. I do think that in general, we each kind of develop our own library of dream images that go with kind of how we're feeling. And we often take them from our lives. So if you had a fender bender right when you first started driving, I imagine that was quite a shock. And it could be that your dreaming mind has taken on that image as a way to tell you that you're feeling anxious or that something is going on that you're uncomfortable with. And it's become like your personal shorthand for what's going on in your life. I know I have shorthands like that myself, and they tend to be taken from something that happened in my life that then becomes the shorthand for the dreaming mind. Is like, oh, you're feeling upset. Is it like that time? Here, let me bring that up and show you again. Is it like this? Is it worse than that? Could it be a worse accident? Could it be an easier accident? And so the accident itself becomes like your own archetypal, a personal archetype. It becomes your own
Yeah.
dream language.
Yeah. Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I wonder why dreams have to be so intense. Um, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, because they're us. Because they're us, and they're. So my personal sense of what dreams are is that it's our emotional lives. But instead of just being inside us, we project those emotions out into the dreaming landscape. And so the entire dream is our emotional life. And so it's become like a three-dimensional thing. And I think that's why those images can feel so intense, because not only are we seeing something coming at us, but we also know from inside what that thing is. So when we get chased by monsters, we get chased by monsters that we intimately know and recognize as being ourselves. The reason they're so scary is because they're coming from in us and coming at us at the same time. So the emotional intensity is off the charts. Now I know the neuroscientists would say, the amygdala is, thing, and the frontal lobe is thing, and we're not really thinking, we're not doing the rational, we're doing the emotional. And I think that that's all true. And I think that those emotions just are so heightened. And there are ways to lessen them, which is actually using our thinking selves as well. So that if you have a strong nightmare, you can think about it during the day and try and re-script how you want that image to go. And our thoughts about it can go back into the dream. The dream will respond to us because they're us. They are responsive to us. So if we say, I want to dream about this, or I want, next time I have this experience, I want to respond to it in this way, the dreams will help us do that. And that does tone it down a little bit. But, we have these amazing, horrible nightmares, and then we go, oh, I don't want to think about it. And then we don't think about it, and then they just come back again and disrupt everything.
Do you, yeah. Has that practice that you just mentioned, dream rescripting, has that been helpful at all? Because I know you mentioned that people at the end of life tend to have more dreams that are more comforting, but I imagine there's still some nightmares that come up. So is that something that you've worked with in your care with at the end of life at all?
I haven't. They don't. No, not
No, they don't.
generally. Yeah, I don't. Well, they come up, but they come up as the thing about the end of life care is that people are so busy. They're in their lives, they're at this end of life, they're in a trauma. The last thing I want to do is try and teach them about a new dreaming technique. It's just not the thing to do. So we'll talk about the dreams, we'll talk about the nightmares, but it's really more like, how did it feel? What was it like? Maybe what do you want to do next time? But mostly it's just letting people talk about what it's like. Monique Seguin is a retired LPN in Quebec, and she always said, "What does the dream remind you of?" Thinking that it would remind them of something that was going on in their lives, and that can help. But dreams at the end of life get very focused in a couple of ways. They do that life review, and they do that moving forward. The nightmares tend to fade as people get closer to dying. But I haven't done the research on it. I've just seen the research of others saying that. So I will put it that way. And
Yeah, yeah. I guess I'm a bit surprised that that's the case. I guess I thought maybe it would be the opposite. As you get closer to crossing over, I thought maybe the existential fear might increase, but it's very interesting. I guess that could be
Yeah.
some real evidence that we know we're more afraid of it as we're further away, maybe as it's more unknown, but as we get closer to it, we can feel that there's not as much to be afraid of that we thought when we were younger or when we were further away. I don't know, is that maybe touching on why that's the
That
case?
could be. I think because our dreams are there for us. So I've got like four things I think about dreams, and one of them is they're us. They are responsive to us. They also are on our side. And when you come up to this great existential moment, dreams will start reflecting more of our hopes and more of our sense of something happening beyond that threshold that's going to lead us forward so that it becomes less frightening. It becomes less about an ending of everything and becomes more about us stepping across to something new.
Could we talk a bit about what you have, I mean, in your experience, dreams of visitations or spirits that have crossed?
You mean personally?
Yeah, from your
Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been at the end of life myself, but I have had visitations. I think visitations are the most extraordinary dreams, and I think they do come back when people are in mourning. So if someone dies, the mourners, the families will often have dreams about them, or it feels like they have come back to see us. And often those dreams, they come back as what I call their best selves. So they come back with fewer of the anxieties or the anger or the what it's like they have come to a new wholeness. And people often talk about that sense of when she died, she was in her 90s, but now I see her and she's in her 30s in the dream. So it's like they come back at a time when they were feeling well. I don't know if that makes sense. So I can tell you about my mother who died in a car accident. Sorry. My mother died in a car accident, and it was terrible. And I was driving the car, which made it really, really hard. A few weeks after her funeral, I had this dream where I was sitting with a friend of mine. We were looking at pictures in the dream, and the pictures were of the funeral. And in the pictures, I could see that there were these beings of light that were holding us all. And it was just really beautiful. And as I was marveling at that, I heard this rumbling sound like a bowling ball coming down the lane towards me. And as it hit, I woke up and it felt like I could hear the sound in my bedroom. And I thought, oh, okay, so maybe there's a burglar in the room. It just woke me up. And so I got up and got my baseball bat. I'm walking around the house, making sure everything was okay. And as I came back to bed, my mother was in the doorway of another room, and she was light, and she was so excited. She was like this very excited person anyway. She had this full energy you wouldn't believe. And she was like, look at all this light. Look, if I do this, there's light under my arms. Look, there's light over my head. If I do that, I'm a freaking angel. and she was so excited. And she came rushing at me, and I put up my hands to stop her because, I don't know, because I was her daughter and I just couldn't handle it. And she smiled at me and she loved me and she was happy, and I went back to bed. And when I got up the next morning, it felt like I didn't need to be forgiven. It felt like she was in the right place and that whatever had happened, she was going to be fine. She was a frickin' angel now. And she was going to go on her merry way. And she just wanted to love me. I think, so that's a very typical visitation, that sense of, or vision. I guess it was kind of a vision dream. I kind of went from a dream to waking to back to sleep again. So what I think about it, is that my dreaming muscles were working, and that I think I had a real experience of a real connection with my mother. And I think my dreaming mind put it into an image that I could understand, that I could fully understand how much love she had.
So that's a powerful dream. Did your skeptical mind come in at all and wonder, like, is that just a projection, or is that really her? Well, I know you said you would believe it was her, but have you always?
I do. I always thought it was her. It felt like her. I felt like I was in her presence. I have dreamed about her since then. I've had grief dreams about her that felt different, but that moment felt like I was in her presence. Yeah.
How were the grief dreams? How did they feel different?
Grief dreams tend to have more plots to them. They tend to have more. They have more plot. They have more actions. And they tend to focus on our emotions. So, I had dreams about my mother playing the piano but not looking at me. Or people have had dreams of trying to talk to someone on the phone but the phone isn't working. Or following them and they cross a threshold and we can't get to them and they just leave. Or dreams of them holding us but then they dissolve and we can't see them anymore. But there's always kind of a sense of I was doing this and then I saw them. And in those grief dreams, sometimes we know that they're dead, sometimes we don't. Sometimes they know they're dead, sometimes they don't. But there's always a sense of kind of working through the loss and working through the relationship.
How does having those dreams help with someone in the grieving process?
I think they help a lot. I think they help, like I said, I think they help people work through the grief. I think sometimes people will have really wonderful dreams and then they wake up and the person is gone and they feel the pain of the grief again. But that feels like a gentle way to help people go through that understanding of loss, which is hard. It's always hard. But how do we kind of get it in our bones, in our hearts, that this person is no longer here? And sometimes even having a lovely dream of them and having to wake up and see them no longer there is a way that we have of kind of getting it into ourselves that this person is gone. And sometimes we have dreams about them and we're angry or we feel lost or they are picking at us. Sometimes we dream about them and they're showing us the part of themselves that we don't really like very much. And we kind of wake up and that's kind of a sense of, okay, but I don't have to deal with that anymore. So it's like there's all kinds of different ways that grief dreams help us kind of go from this sense of I am standing on an abyss of no longer having this person here to I am standing on the edge of a hole where my person used to be, to I have now walked around this hole. I am now older and time has gone by and my life has now gone all the way around that hole. The hole is still there, but now it's contained by the rest of my life. And the blankness, the loss, is now a part of my life, but not all of my life. My life isn't loss. My life contains loss. And that's the way we move forward. The loss will always be there, but we kind of, over time, we get a sense of our lives going on and being big enough to hold on to that loss and hold on to the memories of the people we love without feeling like we are lost. That's really the work of grief, is refinding our lives again.
That's what you said, without feeling like we are lost. Is that something that can happen? Let's talk about, for example, like if someone resists experiencing or looking at or sitting with those grief dreams. What happens with those? I guess it might take longer for them to get around that hole.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for a long time in grief work, the experts were saying if you don't attend to the loss, if you don't work through the loss, it becomes suppressed and then you have to work through it later and it gets harder. But I think they've actually done more research now and found that that's not often the case. That's not always the case. And most people will find ways to incorporate that loss, whether it's through the grief dreams or through working or through putting it aside or through finding their families. There are a lot of different ways that people move forward, and it doesn't need to follow the same kind of path that the grief experts laid out. The grief experts laid out those paths when they were mostly working with people with extreme reactions to loss, the people who came in for therapy. But a lot of people, the thing we found in hospice is, a lot of people are okay. They're not fine, but they're okay. And they feel like they're moving on and their lives are already, they have found a way to understand this loss as one part of their life. So grief dreams can help. Visitations are amazing. If people don't have them, they will find other ways to handle their grief.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, yeah, the visitation, I have lots of wondering.
Yeah.
The visitation dreams, I guess, because I know a lot of some listeners maybe even are more skeptical minded about whether it's true that we have spirits and other people who are waiting for us. And do people who are the people who have visitation dreams typically just people who believe that in that, or with their mindset that they believe that there is, or I wonder, yeah, or do they have the experience and then they believe?
Both. People who have the experience who already believed in afterlife will find that belief strengthened. It's like, I knew it. I knew it. This is great. People who didn't believe in an afterlife and have a visitation. There have been some people talking to researchers and they've said, I still don't believe in the afterlife, but that was so comforting. That was so wonderful.
Yeah.
So they keep the experience, but they get to decide for themselves what it means for them. And I think that's fair. I think even if it's real, the people who are coming to see them will be fine. I remember once I was talking to someone in hospice a long time ago and had said to the husband, at some point, and I hadn't really said this very often. I never said it again after this. At some point, your wife may have dreams or may see people that she remembers. And he said, oh no, if she does that, that's the devil. That would mean that she's going to hell. And I said, well, I just wanted to point it out because sometimes the medications that we use would cause those kind of hallucinations. And if she does, let us know and we will change the medications. I just turned on a dime. And you know what? That's also true, that it's possible to give medications that will stop people from having these experiences, which would be good for him and his wife, heartbreaking for people in other situations where they wanted those visitations. And one of the things that medicine is working on is trying to suss out the difference between a hallucination that's caused by medicine or low oxygen to the brain or the disease process and a visitation that's going to help somebody. And they are finding there are significant differences. And they're getting better, I think. Gradually over time, they will get better at saying if what they're seeing is meaningful, is someone they know and love, is someone who's giving them love and comfort, let it go, let it ride, let it be there. But most hallucinations from medicine or lack of oxygen are things that are meaningless and disconnected to the person and actually cause them distress. So people would see bugs crawling up the wall, or they see animals running through the room that aren't paying attention to them, aren't doing anything with them, just kind of strange little children will run through the rooms. And people often feel confused by it and distressed by it. And so, of course, getting medication to help that is fine.
Mm-hmm.
Holding on to the visitations as the gold they are, that's a good thing.
I love that you said even if they don't believe that it's true, it still helps them and it's comforting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really do like. I love your approach to end of life care, and it's nice to see how you honor the person and their experience and compassionate listening. And yeah, so I wonder if you could talk just a little bit more about kind of your, I don't know, if you could just, I have one more question, if you could just summarize maybe what you've shared so far, or what your approach is to helping with people at the end of life and with the dreams and
Yeah. I
such.
just think there are two things that I have found helps, and one of them is respecting whatever people tell me and helping them move forward the best they can. But the other is really finding a way to open the conversation and finding something gentle that will let people know that they could say anything or nothing at all. So even when I said, how are your dreams these days? A fair number of people, I don't dream, I don't remember my dreams, moving on. And we just move on. It's not a time to teach people how to dream. And on the other hand, when you look at people who are in mourning, there are a fair number of people in mourning who want that visitation experience, but they haven't really spent much time remembering their dreams. And so I've talked to a few different grief counselors, and what they do is they help people start remembering their dreams, put importance on that moment, pay attention to every dream that comes, write them down, treasure them. And with that then will come a greater openness in your dreaming life to finding the visitation dreams. So it's how to help people have the experience they want to have.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to
You're
talk with
welcome.
you and hear about the really important, meaningful work you do. Thanks for sharing everything. And I wonder if you could just share with listeners how they can, if they're interested in reading your books or your website, or how they can reach you.
Sure. They can reach me at my name, JeanneVanBronkhorst.com. It's probably the easiest way. It's an old website. I'm old, so it's an old website.
Okay. Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. It was a
Goodbye.
pleasure.